Back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, and for our fourth segment of the day, like I said, perhaps my favorite positional rankings to do is the tight end position. I love this position because it's been a lot weirder than I could have ever expected, and you guys could have ever expected, just because I thought there was going to be a clear delineation between generations. The younger guys were going to start to emerge, and the older guys were going to start to tire out a little bit. And while we've seen a little bit of that, we've seen a lot more unsung heroes actually step up no matter their age. Whether it be surprising candidates on contending teams or just guys who haven't really gone under their radar throughout the years and are finally shutting their stuff. This position has been just super fun to analyze, and it could prove to be one of the more important positions down the stretch for you. Because, like I said, tight ends have never been the sexiest of fantasy positions. Let me be clear here. Now, they're finally having their chance in the sun. And even though it's been a very weird tight end season statistically, there are still a lot of guys who you're going to value for years to come. Maybe not for as long as you think, because there still is that generational divide. But there's a lot more fun ways to analyze this position now that we see a wide amalgamation of players now stepping up for their respective teams. This list truly proves that the tight end position could run the gamut in terms of what people think of it week in, week out. No clear number one tight end stands out in my mind right now. It could have been Sam Laporta. It could have been Travis Kelce. It could have been George Kittle. It could have been anyone at the top. But I can't really say that any one tight end stands out. That's what makes it so special. So as always, let's get into my favorite positional rankings of the weekend, my tight end. Starting off with a guy who really speaks to this kind of unsung hero on a contending team, which has really stood out this season. One of my favorite tight ends to watch this year in Tucker Kraft. He is a very annoying player, granted, if you don't like the Packers, which I happen to do. But he is still someone who's really exceptional at everything you want out of a tight end. He's physical. He can block. He's a nightmare in the red zone, and most importantly, has an impressive catch radius. A lot of these tight ends need to have pretty impressive catch radii to really stand out in the National Football League, because that's the evolution of the position, right? You can't just be in your one little box. You can't either be a pass-catching tight end or a blocking tight end anymore. We've seen it in the development of certain tight ends. And Tucker Kraft really fits the bill here in terms of how a tight end can evolve. And so that's why, against the Lions, in a very tough matchup, perhaps the toughest matchup out of any tight end in the league, I think it's going to stand out, especially if the Lions can sustain drives. 13.8 fantasy points against Miami. Definitely not his best performance, but certainly one that shows they can be consistent in terms of staying at the bar set for tight ends. Kind of that point tally that you really want your tight ends to hit. He's not necessarily going to be the superstar, like I said for you, but he's been a paragon of consistency at the position, and he's proven that he can develop his skills enough to really stand out for Green Bay this year. Now let's talk about another guy who's been around the block a little bit. We know about this guy. I feel like he's starting to become a little bit more popular in fantasy circles, and has really proven his worth to this football team. He's not necessarily, a traits guy. He's just a kind of all-around, toolsy kind of position player. But at the end of the day, he gets the job done, unlike many other kind of mid-tier tight ends. And he's really differentiated himself from that mid-tier of age group as well. He's kind of in his middle age, kind of not over the hill yet, but not necessarily a young buck. This guy has just been someone who I'm glad to see finally get his day in the sun. And that is Dallas Goedert, going up against the Panthers in what could be a surprisingly interesting matchup now. 12.5 fantasy points against Baltimore, but for perhaps one of the best teams in the NFC and the entire NFL, this is a guy you don't want to see get hot if you're contending for a playoff position. Because Dallas Goedert is someone who really is frustrating to stop if the Eagles' offense is already beating you up. Because as much as It's frustrating to get beat up by Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Imagine the physicality of Dallas Goedert also having a say in your game. And so that's why Dallas Goedert, even though, like I say, he's not necessarily the best in terms of getting touches and target share in this very versatile offense, but in certain matchups down the stretch, maybe not so much in the postseason just because, the Eagles are going to try to impose their will a little bit more and they're going to lean heavily into Saquon down the stretch there. But for now, for the rest of the regular season, Dallas Goedert is going to be an X factor for them. And he's going to be a menace, a nightmare for teams trying to take the Eagles down a notch here. And so that's why I feel like the Eagles are such a scary team outside of their top 4 weapons. Because Dallas Goedert is someone that's been around the block, an experienced player. He can play the position any way you need him to. And either stand out and have a stellar receiving performance or just do his job really well and go understated in terms of performances. And that's what you really want out of a tight end, don't you? Maybe it's not as exciting from a fantasy standpoint, but it's certainly something that I'm liking in seeing a lot of these tight ends because of the fact that versatility matters to them. No matter what you need to do to have success on a certain play, you do it. And Dallas Goedert is the epitome of that statement. And another guy who's kind of more in the surprising category, a guy who's really come on these past couple of weeks, maybe not going to have as much importance in the postseason as well because his team might not even make it, but still a very fun player to watch this past couple of weeks and really fun to monitor from a fantasy standpoint as well. How about Jonnu Smith? One of the more relevant Dolphins tight ends since Mike Gesicki was there. 21.3 fantasy points against Green Bay. Continuing to shock in an offense rife with talent. This isn't an offense in which, a tight end going off would be ordinary. This is an offense that includes one of the better 1-2 punches at the wide receiver position in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and a pretty solid backfield with Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Wright back there. This is an offense that has its top receiver consistently be a tight end as they're trying to make a playoff. But Jonnu Smith has proven his value to this team. And I always viewed Jonnu Smith as one of those weird players who always pops up now and again, never really standing out in his position, but now he's really proven that he can be one of those inline route running type tight ends who can use his yards after catch ability to generate a lot of production. And I think that's what the Dolphins love about him because they're all about speed. They're all about breakaway gains. And that's what Jonnu Smith kind of brings to the table. He's not the speediest player on this team, but he is one of the more effective ones over the past couple of weeks. And most importantly, very efficient when his name is called. Because he doesn't let this offense down, doesn't put them behind the sticks. He, in fact, moves the chains in more ways than one and can do it in a way that the Dolphins appreciate, most importantly. And he's not necessarily someone who is going to potentially have a long run with any one team. Maybe he does sign a contract extension with the Dolphins. Maybe he does like it there. Maybe he continues to be one of the more consistent performers in this offense. But for now, just enjoy the ride while you can with him. Because this is a guy who a lot of people might have found in waivers or a lot of people might have wrote off. But these past couple of weeks, now that you know the Dolphins are going to try their best to be competitive down the stretch, even if they don't make the playoffs, Jonnu Smith has been a revelation, and he could continue to be. Maybe next season he's going to be in a different uniform, in a different situation, or he's going to be right back here and he'll return to his mortal self. But for now, I'm really high on Jonnu Smith. Against a divisional opponent that's reeling right now, look for him to compound their misery. So that's why I think Jonnu Smith definitely merits consideration for the rest of the season. And the last guy I'm going to talk about could have been one of the top tight ends at the position this year. Injury woes a little bit. In fact, injury woes this recent game against the 49ers hindered him from playing, but should be back healthy next week. And the guy who I really want to see stand out over these next couple of weeks, I still believe he is on my personal fantasy team, and I would love to have him back because I'm kind of reeling right now. It could be one of those saving graces down the stretch for me. It's Dalton Kincaid. If this guy plays for the Buffalo Bills, this is your Super Bowl winner. I'm going to say it now. If Dalton Kincaid comes back, stays healthy for the rest of the year, this team is the Super Bowl winner. Because Dalton Kincaid, to me, looks to be the most complete tight end in the NFL. And I don't say that lightly, because when I look at this Bills offense and look at how versatile it has become from where it was when it was very stagnant with Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen trying to win the game with big pass plays to now, Dalton Kincaid truly means a lot to this team. They've not suffered without him, right? But when they're with him, they could blow people away. They can knock the doors down in the AFC. That's how special this kid is. And that's why I'm hoping that when he comes back, the Bills really utilize him. It's going to be a bit risky because he is very injury prone. And I know that, myself included, a lot of people would be ticked off if he continues to get injured throughout the season and is not effective in the postseason. But I feel like once he comes back, you can't deny his abilities at the tight end position. Could have been the tight end one, in my opinion, had he played the whole season. Against the Rams, if he does come back, look out, because that one could get ugly. In potential trap game, if Dalton Kincaid is there, it could make a huge difference. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is the end of our traditional positional rankings. I'm going to do my defense and special teams tomorrow, but this concludes my positional rankings portion of the show, and we conclude today's show with a fantasy fact versus fiction segment. I love doing this segment of justifying or debunking fantasy myths that could stand out this week. We'll be right back after this short break.